What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. Gabe Yanez and I, we are on for our weekly episode. Now, he told me right before we started recording, he's like, bro, I'm coming in hot. I got, we got to have some debate about this. And I'm like, okay, dude, I'm just going to start recording because, come in hot, baby. Come in hot. Good morning. I'm drinking my espresso and Gabe's ready to come in hot. Let's go.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I feel like me and you have talked about a lot wanting to get people with like different opinions on the podcast. I think it's super important, right? Like getting guests that don't think about everything that we think in the same exact way. Cause I think that that's how you like really grow and learn. And especially if you go into those conversations like open-minded, I've told you this many times. I think that and I really try and do this very intentionally, like strong beliefs loosely held. Like I feel very strongly about things, but I want someone to make a compelling case about why I'm maybe not seeing things right, why maybe like I haven't had a lived experience that maybe would change my thinking about something. Like I want that. Like tell me what am I not looking at? What am I missing so that I can like grow my perspective and grow? And the reason I was giving you a hard time before is I feel like me and you actually don't see eye to eye and don't, you're always like, hey, I think we're talking over each other. Or like we're saying the same thing. And I'm like, dude, we're not saying the same thing. And I think that that's good. Like I want to have, I want to have more conversations with you because we talk a lot on the things that like we don't agree on. And I think that that's perfectly okay. And that again, we've talked about this when it comes to politics and all sorts of things. Like there's nothing wrong with me and you not agreeing about everything all the time. And I want to hear why some of the things that I've like said or brought up, you're like, why don't you agree? Like, why don't you think that that's the case? Like maybe there's something I'm missing. And I want to have those types of conversations a little more. The whole coming in hot thing, I'm kind of giving you a hard time, but I do want you to like push back on some of the things that you disagree with me on versus just being like, yeah, and then moving on. Like I want to have a little bit of back and forth here. Like, come on. Yeah.
We need to be, we need to be in person. Just go ahead and arm wrestle. That's all we need to do. Bottom
sure.
line.
You want to arm wrestle.
I think a lot of what this comes down to, I was actually texting with a buddy of mine this morning and I was talking to him about just life. I was just, one of the things we put up on social media recently is we put up this idea of like, call a friend, et cetera. And I've really taken that to heart. I think that when you think about social media, and social media is a very odd landscape that you got to kind of learn how you want to utilize it. But one thing that does for me is that if you're sharing messages, you want to try and live that as well. And I consider myself probably more than most connected to a lot of guys, like a lot on a regular basis. But some of my old high school and college friends, I could probably do a better job of staying in touch with. So I was just calling each one, just, checking in. And we talk regularly. It's just not as often as I'd want. But I was talking to a buddy of mine this morning and I was like, hey man, what's blah, 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 blah. I said, yeah, with the social media stuff and with, trying to put out a more compelling message, but without pissing some people off is hard, right? That's what I told him. It's the truth. And he goes, the positive impact of your message goes far beyond the hurt feelings of a few. And this is something that you and I have gone back and forth about a lot, but a lot of it stems from social media and how to impart a message without, for me, feeling like I'm changing who I am as an individual. So that's something that's fresh on my mind. If you want to talk about, conflict, right? It's mainly that.
Yeah. And I think that like the biggest thing that like me and you have had a lot of conversations about, and we've talked about this to an extent on the podcast, but there was like a specific example that I kind of want to dive into is just this fact that, I think that if inspiring and motivation was enough, like if that really was the thing that like men needed more of to really make a change, then I think people would have already made a change. Like our audience would have already made a change. Like they would already be compelled. And I haven't seen that. And I think that like, I love everything that we've built with Train. Like I feel such an, like, honestly, like train hard in my blood, man. Like I love everything we've done with this podcast, with this newsletter, with the community. I mean, I'm not lucky enough to be at the Train Hard Men's Club that you put together, but seeing those pictures of those guys in that group growing and everyone taking their shirts off, like, dude, I love what we're doing. And a lot of that has made me like really double down and even get outside of my own comfort zone of like, okay, what are people doing out there that are having a bigger impact than us? Why is that working and how can we emulate that? And the one thing that like just keeps coming up time and time again is that we're talking to a predominantly male audience. And Like I can myself relate to this, that when there's something that I really need to be called out on and changed, like just like the inspiration, like seeing other people doing something that maybe I could be doing better, it's really not enough. Like the times where I've had to like change something, and Ariel does this best of all, my wife, like you kind of just need to be called out, like harsh, but honest, like really just like, hey, this is where you're falling short. And knowing that it's coming from a place of like love and empathy, which honestly, that's where all of what I say on this podcast comes from. Like I take very seriously the fact that a lot of people respond and they're like, hey, the podcast has motivated me to do this and be consistent with this. Like that is awesome. But I do genuinely believe that the way we can have a bigger impact is by saying some of the maybe harsher truths that yes, 100%, some people are going to be like, whoa, who is this guy? Like, you know, and it might come off as like we're bashing certain people or whatever, but I think it's just like calling out like pretty objective truths. Like if you're not doing certain things, you're falling short, period. If you're, you know, not being intentional about X, Y, and Z, like you're not living up to your potential as a dad and a husband. Like these things aren't like they're to me, at least, they're not subjective. And that's where I want to understand from you, maybe what am I not seeing about some of the things that we talk about? And the latest example is this thing of like, you know, I think that going out there and like just saying, hey, like the way you look is a reflection of your habits. Like it is. It's a very like black and white physical representation of like how you're taking care of yourself. And that's not meant to like be judgy or shame or bash anyone. I just think that it's like, is it a harsh fact? Of course it's a harsh fact, especially if you like look in the mirror and you're not like particularly fired up with what, you know, you see. But that could either be something where you're like offended and do nothing about it, or it could light a fire under your ass to like completely change who you are physically. And then that trickles down to how you show up as a dad, how you show up as a husband, the confidence you bring to work, now how much you can provide. All of those things like stem from this moment where you were like, shit, like I don't like what's looking back at me at the mirror. And that's because it's a reflection of the habits that I can change that are well in my control. And that will impact positively everything else in my life. So I don't know. What am I not seeing there?
No,
that's something that we've kind of like.
The problem with social media is there's no nuance. The problem with social media is it seems like you're attacking. And this is frankly a big subject between Gabe and I. Big. Is this regular discussion on, in particular, Instagram, dude. It's like, I don't know why. It's like, it's a huge block for me. YouTube, I definitely want to grow that. Podcast, obviously we've been very consistent 3 times a week. But you know, when you say that the way you look is a direct reflection of your habits, do I agree with that? I would say for most cases, most of the time, yes, I definitely agree with that, right? There's always an exception to that rule. Like, you know.
But there's an exception to every rule. There's
an exception.
Always.
There's an exception to basically almost every rule, right?
So then that to me, like that's pretty much it. Then it is what it is. Like you can find an exception to absolutely
where I
anything.
get hung up on with Instagram in particular is like coming off like, I don't know. It's a totally an insecurity piece, but it's like coming off preachy, coming off judgmental. I don't want to be that guy. I want to be the guy where like, dude, we're here to build people up, not break people down. And I think that's where it's a tough line, especially with like what you're talking about with men responding to this. It's like, I don't know if that's necessarily true. Do I think that there's a lot of social media people that are growing because they come out across that way? For sure. But do I also think there's a lot of guys out there who are probably making a super positive impact in other ways? Yeah, like a pastor, for example. I don't know how much they would call people out, but show them the way as an example. I mean, that's probably a different type of example, but that's something I reflect on a lot. Is like, how do you put out a message that invokes an emotion that makes a change without changing who you are? Because like in person, if I was with you, I don't know if I'd look at some guy and be like, dude, like the way you look is a direct reflection of your habits. I'd probably talk to him and be like, hey man, like let's talk about what's going on. Like I'd probably want to like discuss it more and show them the way, not be like, you're a piece of crap for looking, you know what I mean? It's just, and that's what social media is tough because you're not going to get any clicks if you say that same thing.
For sure. And that's why part of it is playing the game. But I think that there's such a distinct difference in like one-to-many communication and one-to-one communication. They're just completely different. They're not one and the same. Like I would never put out a message that I'm trying to get to reach. There's an advantage to social media in that you can reach many people and have many people like elicit an emotion to want to dive deeper with you. And I think that like, yes, that could be negative in many ways, but it can also be an extreme positive. And that is the first step to try and get people to then dive deeper to these conversations on a podcast, to our newsletter, to other places where the communication inherently is different and more uplifting because people have made the decision to be there. But I think that the difference to me specifically on social media is that people are inherently there because they're kind of like wasting time, like they're scrolling. Like it's a place where you should get called out. You know what I mean? Like it's a place where you should like, you know, be like shooken a little bit about like, what are you doing here on your phone? Here's a message about something you could be doing that's a lot more important. Or here's like a really powerful message that hopefully makes you realize that like, you know, hey, there are some things that I should do better. Like the pastor example, I think is actually a pretty good example because if you're at church listening to a pastor, like you've already made so many decisions to be there open to a message. Like there would be no point of that being like a negative, like calling out message. Like you're there, you're doing the process. That's where you should get the guidance and the inspiration to do the right thing. But social media is so specific because you're literally trying to, you have like a 2-second split second while they're scrolling through whatever else they're scrolling through, like images of girls' butts and like, you know, like wasting their time with all this other stuff. And you have like a split moment to hopefully say something that just like makes them want to take some sort of action. And that's my goal. That's what I think that we could do better. And I think that you have to kind of like shake people a little bit and then provide the nuance once they've kind of like decided that like, man, that kind of hit hard. And now I want to dive a little bit deeper. Like they're just, to me, they're apples and oranges. And I think that that's a very important distinction because I think that you always come back to like, well, I would never say this to like someone, you know, one-on-one when they come to the garage for a workout. And I'm like, of course you shouldn't. That would be terrible. That would make you kind of a dick, but it's completely different. It's so different.
Yeah. And maybe I can't separate those two. And I mean, I'd be curious, like the people that are listening to this conversation right now, I'd be curious. I mean, message us in because are they different? Right. You know what I'm saying? Because to me, it's hard for me to separate. Different. No, I know, but for me, it's hard to separate that. And I guess like, you know, people, it's hard for them to kind of completely relate, right? But I'm sure they can a little bit where it's like, you want to come off the same way you would in person. And when you have someone tell you that the message isn't something you would expect them to say in person, that's weird. That's tough, right? But
yeah, but I think
but maybe more people nowadays realize that it is a game. Maybe social has evolved, but I wish there was no game. I wish that we could just spit truth on the podcast, get the newsletter out there and get a bunch of people on the new Train Hard app so we can engage with them in a really like fruitful way. And maybe we got to play the game to get them there. You know, maybe that's just what I got to tell myself.
I think 100%, but I think that what I wanted to get to the bottom of here, and I was like, you know, like, what am I not seeing is like, at the end of the day, you agree with, you know, the fact that like how you look is a reflection of your habits. So it's not putting out something that you don't believe. It's putting out something and being okay with the fact that some people are going to be super sensitive to the fact that there are, you know, these very rare exceptions where that might not be the case. Like that's the thing. Like if you were like, hey, no, I completely disagree with that for reasons X, Y, and Z, then I would be like, yeah, super unauthentic to then, you know, go out there and post that on social media because you don't believe it. But if you
think a lot of the times where you and I have conflict is not necessarily we disagree on like the thing. I mean, you did want to put up one that I do generally disagree with.
Let's get to it. Which one?
You said you wanted to create one that part of it was the worst kind of dad is the armchair quarterback. Now, I understand all of this is in like, you wanted it to like be the hook is the worst kind of dad, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's the worst kind of dad, ? Is the armchair quarterback, right? And then it goes into yells hustle, but doesn't train, preaches healthy eating, but lives on fast food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I can make a strong argument why by far the worst kind of dad is not that guy. Like, that's not the worst dad. There are plenty of other pieces of shit out there. Oh, I mean, dude, come on. I mean, if the worst dad out there is the guy who's an armchair quarterback, I mean, frankly, if the worst kind of dad out there is someone who yells hustle someone who preaches healthy eating, someone who says never quit but skips workouts. Like if the worst kind of dad is the one that's
isn't doing those things. So tell me, so what's the worst kind of dad then? Because I think that it again goes to like, are there extreme examples of like abuse or leaving or whatever? Sure. But those are extremely rare in the grand scheme of things. I think the problem with the armchair quarterback examples, that's happening a lot. Like there are a lot of dads out there that want these things for their kids, but aren't living it themselves. Like a lot. Like I think it's very common. Now, again, there's an exception to everything. And if you're trying to, in X amount of characters or in a 20-second clip, explain something and also caveat every single exception where this statement isn't true, then, you got to live on 3-hour podcasts exclusively. And I don't think that's how you put out a message. I don't think that's how you build a brand. I don't think that's how you build a community. I don't think that's how you can't just do the one long medium where it's super comfortable to say, hey, I believe X, but there's also exceptions A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and spend hours and hours doing that. Of course, there are terrible dads out there that would do terrible things that, we can go on and there's a million examples of it. The problem with the armchair quarterback dad is that I think that that's happening a lot. And I think that you would agree with that. I think that the examples that are on there are things that like a lot of dads are going to be like, hey, go out there, man, and hustle on the field. But then it's like, didn't do my workout today. Like didn't have enough time. What's going on there? Like I think that's an issue and I think we should call it out. I think that that's important. I think that's happening a lot. And I would like to think that like the extreme examples, unfortunately, are happening, but nowhere near as much.
I don't know about that stat, right? I think that there's like when I read the worst kind of dad, it invokes an emotion. Like I don't think that that's the worst kind of dad. That's my opinion because there's so many dads. Like if that's what we're gonna say, dude, at least you're out there saying these positive things to the kid. Like that's my opinion, right? Yeah, you might not be living it, and it's a hypocrisy. Like, and I get it, but the worst kind of dad is the guy that's not even saying anything. The guy who just stays at home, the guy that doesn't show up, the guy that is making no positive impact at all. Like that's the worst. And then there's a layer of even worse than that, of course, which is abuse and a piece of shit, or, has a kid and then doesn't decide to like be there in their life at all. Those people are the worst dads. Those are the worst. But at least I wouldn't put these guys as the worst. I'd say not to be that guy for sure. Do you get what I'm saying? Like if you're going to say, hey, these are the worst dads, I'd much rather have a dad who says, hey, never quit, says never quit, and then skips their workout than a dad who never says anything.
I mean, I think that they're the same. I would put it at exactly the same level because it's an empty word. It's an empty message. Like you're not living it. Like I think that if anything, that like creates a relationship to where you'll never have the opportunity to really embody anything on your kids because you're saying one thing but not doing the other. I don't think that they're that different at all, Yeah,
I guess the way I look at it is like, I spend a lot of time at youth sports, a lot. And I guess the way I would look at it is that I'd rather have a dad who's out of shape, unengaged, or like whatever, unengaged isn't the right word. I'd rather have a dad who's out of shape, like not optimized in all of his areas, but still shows up to all the games and tries to impart at least something basic, but isn't living it, than someone who just never shows up at all. Because I've seen that, and that's the worst. And again, I'm biased. I'm jaded. I see. You're talking about a lot. There's a lot of kids who have no one at these games. A lot, right? That is the worst. You see what I'm saying? Because they can't. They're not even getting anything from anybody. At least in that case.
But I mean, like going back to your, I was just listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about how much time, like how present does a dad really need to be? And it was an interesting conversation. I don't think I agreed with what the guest was saying wholly, but it was an interesting conversation in that, what if that dad is out there doing just incredible shit, And sure, he's not there as present, but it was actually Patrick Bet-David was talking about, he calculated the hours that he had with his dad because his dad was always busy, always working, first generation immigrant, like was never really around. didn't go to sports games, didn't go to practice, like just wasn't around. And he calculated to a number because he was literally like, he saw him for like, I don't know, 1 hour, 2 hours a week. So I was like, literally, I spent like this many hours of my childhood with my dad. And, you know, he like asked his dad about that now that they're in old age, he actually lives with him. And he was like, you know, do you regret any of that? Like, do you wish you were around more? And his dad said, like, you are the man you are today because of like all the opportunity and stuff that I gave you and the lessons that I imparted in the short time that I was with you. And I just think that there's, you know, to your point, an exception to everything. But I do think that, like, you know, that to me is something that, especially in your world, you know, in where you live, and there's a lot of high performers, a lot of that exists too, right? Like, I don't know, why is the dad not there? You know, is he building something fucking crazy and creating an incredible opportunity for his kids? And the time that he is with his kids, he's incredibly, incredibly intentional. You don't know that, you know?
I don't know that. I don't know that. You're absolutely right. I just think that, like, man, I just, if I could just bundle up what we want to do in social, I just want to be able to get a lot of like-minded guys to just join us in a community and level each other up. And frankly, like, if we will have to continue to do this, but my goal is to one day not even have to use that medium anymore, and to have the community, refer people. Like the men's club here, like there's no real promotion for it. It's all referral. And that's my goal one day with the Train Hard, is just referring guys. Dude, this thing has been impactful in my life for these reasons. That's where I want to get to. But in the meantime, we will continue to share messages. I just think that, like, again, for the worst kind of dad, I don't know, man. You know, you got to be able to defend these things. And that's a tough one for me. I understand that a lot of it is nuance, but I think it gets lost when you see something.
A lot of it is nuance. And, like, again, because I want the same thing, dude. I want to get the message out to as many men as possible. And, you know, as a marketer and, like, studying the art of just capturing people's attention in a time where, like, dude, attention is fleeting. Short. And, you know, like, you have to say something that stops people in their tracks. You just have to. We both have the same goal, reaching as many men as possible. It's just, there needs to be a willingness to put stuff out there that is just going to make people want to read a little more, dive a little deeper, because I think that what we're doing is very powerful. I think that the guests that we have on, the conversations we've had, the journey that I've had just being a co-host of this podcast, like, dude, I wish more men were listening to the show. I genuinely do. I think that there's something really, really special that we're building here. And it's why I feel so passionate about, like, just how do we get eyeballs, man? How do we get eyeballs? And again, you know, never saying something that's completely out of left field. And I don't think any of the things that we've talked about today are. There's a case to be made to where there's truth to that. Sure, is there an aspect of, like, you know, making it a little bit of a clickbaity statement just to stop people in their tracks? But I think that that's the point. Like, that should be the goal, because otherwise we're not going to grow. You know, we're just going to stay with people that are already in our echo chamber, already doing all the right things. Like, there's a lot of men out there that I think could really benefit from what we're doing. And I think that the best way to, like, capture their attention is to do something that's going to capture their attention. Like, you're competing against all sorts of other people that are playing the game. I get that the game is a double-edged sword, but, you know, you can say, hey, I don't want to play that game, but it's all right. You're not going to have as much of an impact, period. You're making that decision.
Well, here's a takeaway so far from the podcast. For those of you who listen to this on a regular basis, I know quite a few of you do, share this episode in particular, with, like, 3 friends. And here's the reason why, is, like, we're just having a real conversation about where we're at. So the way that we get this message out, I think the podcast is our most impactful platform. I think the newsletter is actually really impactful too, but I think the podcast is probably the most impactful, especially all the different guest episodes, I think are super impactful. So share this one with at least 3 friends, and then hopefully they'll go back and listen to some awesome episodes. We have some incredible guests coming on the show as well. So that's something that you guys could do listening here to help us out, because you're hearing us kind of debate how we're doing this. What you could do for us is share this with 3 friends.
Let me ask you something else that you seemingly disagreed with me on. Is it our responsibility as men to provide financially specifically?
No, I don't think so. If there's, you mean if your spouse has, if you and your spouse have had a conversation and that you're lined up where that doesn't align with your lifestyle, that she's going to go ahead and provide financially?
Not necessarily, but like, so for example, one thing that I thought was really, and I don't think this episode has come out yet, and it might come out after this one comes out, but we had a really, really honestly cool conversation with Ann Malum, right? And she brought up, as someone who's in a relationship with, you know, she's incredibly successful. So if the episode hasn't come out yet, like the quick, like, you know, cliff notes on Ann Malum is that she is like a complete badass. Like, build a business, sold it, $100 million, you know, exit. Like, she's doing it, right? And she's now been married for 1 year with her husband, who isn't as financially successful. And they've had conversations. She was very open about their prenup. And one really interesting thing that she brought up is acknowledging the fact that, like, it's important for her husband to be the provider, even though that's very much not the case in like an extreme lopsided way. So they work ways into where, like, he pays for everything, even though it's their account, but like, she knows that it's important for him to do that. And I think that to an extent, recognizing the fact that like, I don't think that this is, well, this actually is very controversial to say, but you know, I believe that there are very clear differences between men and women. And I think that like,
I don't think that's controversial at all, by the way. Very clear differences.
Some people will say it's controversial. Anyway, I think that there's something deeply ingrained in men that like our purpose, like what gives us fulfillment is to protect and provide. I think that that's why I feel so strong that those are like, that's our tagline, train, protect, and provide. Those terms come out time and time again with different guests we have on. I think that there's just like, for men to truly be fulfilled, they have to feel like they're doing those things. And I think acknowledging that is important because yes, if you are married with, you know, your wife and your wife is like an absolute badass, like wants to build a career, has been super successful. And that's something that like fires her up and she wants to do it. Even after you have kids and all that, and you've had that conversation, like awesome. Like you should 100% do that. But I think that like one thing that I was thinking about after the Ann conversation is acknowledging the fact that there still has to be some way where the man feels like he's providing because that's such a like deep need to fulfill, I think was pretty eye-opening. It was eye-opening.
I think that we got to make sure we associate like the word provide. I agree with you. So we're in agreement.
But I'm talking even strictly financially because I know that provide means more than that. But I think that I don't think that it's wrong to say that that's something that like brings men fulfillment. And this has been like covered by a lot of like scientific studies. Like there's studies that very clearly document the fact that like, this is why women only date like up in terms of financial. Like women are looking for this as well. Like,
yeah, but I mean, yes, I would say that in most cases, what you're saying is true. And in her case, by the way, you know, I brought that up to a group of women that I was with the other day. I was like, hey, I had a really cool podcast with Ann. And she said that in this prenup, she basically gave her husband like money. She didn't say how much, if I'm not mistaken. And that he then can go invest it and build up that money so that it feels like it was his money, right? Which I was like, oh, that's kind of a cool idea. I've never heard it like that before. And they were like, yeah, I don't know about that. Like, I don't know how that would work, but every relationship is different. And I think putting like a stamp across all relationships that men have to do this, I think is tough. But I think that you're right in the sense that like, there is that, it has came up on the show nonstop. Protect, provide are both things that men need for fulfillment. I just don't know if with the provide, it always needs to be financial. I think they need to feel like they are delivering value in a way that's like adding to the family. Like, so I'm not talking about like providing experiences and stuff like that. That's separate. I'm saying like they're doing something for the family that's like growing it, evolving it, providing for it. You know what I mean? And that could be taking care of the kids. I mean, right? Like, I think that there's a level of like providing for this household that probably could give some fulfillment. I can't speak from that specifically, right? But I imagine we should probably, you know what we should do? We should get a guy on who's like, to talk about that specifically. about what you asked. We should get someone on who falls into that category and see what they're saying about it. Because you and I, we can't, we're in our own echo chamber about that, right? But let's hear from someone who says, yeah, this is the way that I look at the term provide, and this is the way I do it. And it's like, oh, okay, cool. Right?
Yeah, I guess that for me, it really just comes down to acknowledging the fact that like that's something that is a calling for men in many ways, and that's pretty much it. Like, you should.
Well, what if you don't have a family? So, I was talking to that guy I told you about at Muster, who was talking about how you could still provide without having a family. And, you could find other ways to do that. And he was giving a few examples, but like, how about a guy who's listening to this who doesn't have a family, doesn't have anything, and so how does he provide then? I guess he provides for himself. I guess he could find fulfillment through a bunch of other ways, right? Providing for the church, providing for his nephews, providing for what? Providing value, making an impact on other people, getting told that, hey, what you're doing matters.
One of the most impactful things that I ever heard, and I think this is a Jordan Peterson quote, and I don't remember the exact quote, but the definition of being a man is going from being like a liability to a net asset. And that doesn't require you having a family. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
For a long time, obviously when you're a child, but then, even when you're, again, just in college, like all you're doing is taking from society. You're learning, you're acquiring knowledge, like you're not providing anything to the world, to society, to your community. And the definition of going from being a boy to being a man is when that turns. Like when you actually start being a net positive, whether that's by starting a family, by raising kids, by building a business, by creating jobs, by becoming a leader in your community, by, helping men with fitness. Like all of those things are, to me, examples of providing. And at the end of the day, like that is a very deep calling for men. I think that, women can do it too, and they can do it in an incredible way. But I think that there is a calling there for more, caretaking and taking care of people. And that's why they thrive and tend to gravitate to more of those services and industries. And again, there's exceptions to every rule. And none of this is to say that women can't be incredible providers and badass leaders and all of those things. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there's something to that is like to me, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. The goal for any young man.
But then to your point, then does it have to be financial, right? Because you started off by saying, do you have to provide financial? But based on Jordan Peterson's analogy, which I totally agree with, right? That you go from being a liability to now you're providing into the community. Like you are giving. It's such an easy way to look at it, right? Like I imagine like back in the day, like old school days, right? Hunter-gatherer days. You start off as a liability. You start off as taking, right? You need to be fed. You need to be done this, and which you should. And then at some point, that shift occurs where you go from taking to now you're providing for the community. You're bringing food. You're teaching other men how to hunt. You're whatever is going on, right? So then in that case, wouldn't that break down the idea that it just is financial?
No, because back in the day, that is financial. Like
yeah, but
back
today,
in the day,
could you do the same thing?
Well, I think that financial is at the basis because you can't do any of those other things if you don't first start by being like self-sufficient. Like the first thing you need to do is have your own job and be able to provide for yourself. So you're not like, living on your parents' checkbook. That's the first thing. Like you can't be a leader in your community. You can't do anything if you're still taking, you're still being a net liability to the family. And that freedom only happens financially. Like you have to have a skill, have a job, do something. That's where I think like providing financially is like at the basis of all this, because we live in a world where you need to be financially successful to an extent to be able to do any of these other things. If you're not financially self-sufficient, how are you going to, insert the other definition of provide? Whether that's with kids or without kids, you're not. Yeah. Now, once you get linked up with a spouse, and if they're the ones that want to, become that in your now team of two, perfectly fine. I think that that's different. But like, even in finding a spouse in the first place. And that goes back to the other thing that's been like studied like very, very in depth.
Yeah.
Like your chances of finding a spouse and finding a spouse that you're going to be very content with as a man is directly proportional to like how financially successful you are. You'll have a lot more options if you're financially successful. So I think that that's where, to me, it does all stem, and it isn't just financial, but it stems from being able to provide financial.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess taking a step way back, I would agree with what you're saying about, like, if you're a young man, you're coming up, you have to be able to create some independence, right? You have to be able to take care of yourself at the start. And then eventually, like you said, if you find a spouse and it works out. But I guess the really way to think about it, though, is like, dude, you could provide so much in so many ways. Like, man, you can go to a youth group and you could support, you could do all these different things. But I get what you're saying. You got to be able to take care of yourself first, right? You got to be able to take care of yourself. And then now with that bucket, right, you're able to go do so much good shit. I mean, think about all the young boys out there who could get a mentorship from someone who's, a young man or a grown man. Anyways.
And again, like even in that example, I think the best mentors are the ones that have had financial success to an extent, 100%, because that has given them a lot of real world experience to hand off to these other men. And you have no time to go help at a youth group if you don't have the flexibility because you've done something that has given you that freedom, and financial means give you that freedom a lot of the time. Now, it's different again if you've found a spouse. They're going to be the ones that take that on for the team, and then you're the one that has that freedom. Sure, like that can happen. But I mean, you've been the biggest proponent of this, and I think that this is what it boils down to. Like, you have to make more to give more. Like that's just like, that's what it boils down to. Like, being financially successful allows you to have the financial means and the time to find a cause that you're super fired up about and give to it. Like it's at the basis. Providing is at the basis of all that. And that's why I think it's so important.
Yeah.
Financially, specifically.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, we can go in circles about this. At the end of the day, right? Every relationship, they need to figure out what's going on. I think that, but like, because to think that a guy has to just go, anyways, I get.
No,
what you're
give
saying.
it to me. What?
No, I'm just saying, like, I don't think a guy has to go make a bunch of money to feel like they're providing. That's all I'm saying. I think that a relationship needs to be, and I think that I imagine there's plenty of people out there who would agree with that. Like, dude, and on the same token, we talk about this all the time. If you're just making a bunch of money, it doesn't mean shit. Because you could be not showing up all those other areas, right?
Yeah. Extreme examples to everything, for sure. Money's kind of one of those things that always just gets weird to talk about. But I think like being blunt about the fact that it's at the foundation to an extent to allow you to do these other things. And I think that it honestly is like the precursor to being able to do anything else, because it gives you flexibility, it gives you freedom, it gives you the ability to make whatever decision you want, right? Like, we made the decision that Ariel's going to stay home and be the caretaker of the kids. She wanted to do that. But the only way we were able to even make that decision is because we were in a financial position to do so. And it gives you the liberty to make that decision. Like, we could have also decided, hey, we're going to pay for babysitting and Ariel's going to continue to build her career. Like, we had the ability to figure that out. But that came because, I've gotten us to the position where like we can make that decision. And part of that is, part of that is like, making decisions about where we live and like, the standard of living that we want and having like realistic expectations for all that. But I think that all of that, again, you have the freedom to make those decisions if you've put yourself in the position to be able to do so. And I think that like talking about the financial aspect, I messaged you the other day. I would love to have a guest on the podcast that can talk specifically about finances and like, how to be financially healthy. I think that that's something that isn't talked about enough and is incredibly important. And at the end of the day, in most relationships, in most families, is kind of like the realm of the guy. Like, the guy is the one that like is responsible for making sure that the family as a unit is financially healthy and in a good position, and like retirement and life insurance and saving up for the kids' college funds, like all those things. Yes, they're team decisions, they're team things. I'm obviously talking to Ariel about this all the time, but at least in my case, and I would think in yours, and I would think in many, like the buck falls on me. Like, if that stuff isn't ultimately taken care of, it's because I didn't take care of it, not because Ariel didn't take care of it. Ariel's like in charge of like home, the kids, like what we're going to do for schooling, food, all of that. This is my realm. And I think that that's in most cases, and it's incredibly fulfilling. And I think it's an important thing for us to talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, I got a good guy for that. I got a guy we'll have on. I met him at a mastermind like 5 years ago, and I will see if we can get him on the show to talk specifically about what you just shared. So,
yeah, dude, I think it's super important because like,
yeah, you're probably right. I mean,
similar
there's no
to nutrition and fitness, there's so much noise out there.
No, you're right. No, you're right.
So much noise.
You're right. You're right. We will get someone on to talk about that. Dude, I got so many stories I want to share, but we went off on multiple different conversations here.
I love it. I have a good story too.
I'll tell you. Can I share with you a text message?
Yes.
I'm just gonna, and then I'll just kick this off, and then we can talk about your story. Text message comes in. All right. This is a little bit of a change of pace. If you're listening to this, get fired up. Good morning, Jason. We have sustained resistance coming up on March 28th. This is a high-stress, physically demanding simulation fight that recruits go through. Do you have any interest in coming out to help with the ground fighting portion? Can you imagine when I got this text, just the smile that came across my face? It was like I was a kid at Disneyland. Do you have any interest in coming out to help with the ground fighting portion of this? I wrote back, yes, absolutely. When do we start? Like basically, like what role do you want? I said, yes, absolutely. What role am I playing? He goes, great. It's at our mat room at 0700. So that's early. No late, and then you're done at 5 p.m. So 1700. So it's like a full day. You would be doing the gun retention portion if you're open to that. Basically wrestling with a recruit, trying to take their gun for approximately 1 minute. I wrote back just, hell yeah, I'll be there.
These guys are going to get bodied.
Dude, how sick is that going to be, bro? How much fun is that going to be? I am going to have so much fun. So they have like a level 3 retention holster. So it isn't like super simple to take a gun out. So I'm going to have to work on like specifics on getting that out of that particular holster because it's a level 3. So it has like a multifaceted approach. But dude, when I got that text, I was like, fuck. I was like, I've been waiting my whole life for this text.
So to clarify for anyone listening that's confused, because I was a little confused in the beginning, but I have the notes that you put in before. The sheriff's office is asking you to help with their training for new recruits, specifically ground fighting and making sure that they can keep their gun on them if a bad guy's trying to take it away. Correct?
Absolutely. And I am going to play the role of the bad guy. I will have my, mask on or whatever. I don't care what I have on, but I will play the role of the bad guy. And I am just so excited. I'm so excited because for two particular reasons. One is it's been a goal of mine to acquire skills and then share them with other people and make an impact. It's really important to me. I do a ton of work with law enforcement. People who listen to this show know that. But this is a real life example of how I could utilize skills that I've learned to go and help out this upcoming academy, which makes me feel like I'm providing and I'm fulfilling its fulfillment. In addition, I want to see where I stack up. I want to see, dude, if you got 100 recruits, how many of them can I smother so that they are literally just like desperately wanting me off them? Like, I'm really curious. Like, let's just not talk about it. Let's see if I can actually back it up. Like, dude, out of the X amount of recruits, how many can I get? I want to know.
I'm really curious after you do it, what the experience is like. But I would assume that, if anything, the question I was going to ask you is like, are you trying to, like, is your goal going into it, you think, to like, in 20 seconds, like get this guy's gun and be like, dude, you like wake up call style, like this shouldn't be this easy? Or are you trying to like, give him a little bit of a battle, but like, let them like, build a little bit of confidence per se?
No, I'm going to go 100%.
Okay.
In this particular case, the reason for that is that they're signing up to do this job and they need to know what it feels like if a guy like me happens to come across him on the street.
Sure.
Of course, when I say I go 100%, within reason, within safety, I'm not trying to hurt anybody. That's not the intention.
And I think another thing too is you have like pretty good understanding of like, what 100% is for, someone that's your size and your strength, maybe not trained, but your size and your strength. Probably not anyone there that's your size and your strength, but at least your size versus someone that would be like on my size, for example, and untrained. That would be a very different approach. I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that in this particular case, again, to just level set, when I show up at gyms, dude, I try and be the best training partner on the planet. That's what I'm trying to do.
This is super different. Yeah, you're preparing them for like what potentially could be a life and death situation.
Right. And I don't know if I'm doing them any service of not approaching it with like maximal effort to make them realize, because like you talk about getting shaken, right? This is one of those situations where I don't mind being the guy who is shaking a little bit because they have chosen this career path, right? They've chosen to go out there and be a sheriff. And I think that we're doing them a disservice if we don't show them like, hey man, if you cannot retain your gun for 1 minute, we have a big problem. We need to go train.
Man, it's so funny because I feel exactly the same way about the messaging that we put out for just like dads and men. Exactly what you said, dude. Like, dude, if the stuff you say, like, you know, rubs you the wrong way, we have a big problem. Anyway,
yeah. And
as you were saying that's how I was feeling about it. But yeah.
Yeah. I think that if someone, and I do this all the time, right? When I go give my talks at the academy, but if you're choosing to take an oath, right?
Yeah. But a lot of the stuff that we put out that for like, you chose to start a family. You chose to have kids. How does that not come with the responsibility of like living up to that? I don't understand.
Yeah. No, that is true. That is true. I mean, and that's why we put out the messages we do. But I mean, bro, some would say that some of the stuff that we say is borderline.
Oh man.
But dude, hey, I can't wait to fill you in on how that one went.
Yeah, that'd be fun. That'd be super fun. Yeah.
I'm really, I don't know if I'm going to film anything or if I'm allowed to. I mean, I don't really care. I'm not doing this for publicity. I'm doing this because I'm genuinely so excited about this.
Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be super cool. Dude, this story really quick that Bloom told me the other day. So she read this she's on like two different like Facebook moms groups for like the areas, super common. Yeah. And one mom posted this story that happened, I think in New Braunfels, which is the town over, but just dude, interesting takeaways here, but essentially, you know, a mom and her daughter like out later than they usually are because there was like a late practice, like didn't have anything prepped for dinner. So went to a fast food place, like all situations that like, you know, the mom was describing, like she usually isn't in. So a little bit different. Yeah. So they go to this fast food place, they sit down at a table and there are these three guys clearly coming off of like some sort of like construction shift work, like guys. And the fast food place is like completely empty. And they sit like table right next to her. So she's kind of like.
So they came in after her and her daughter were already there.
They came in after her and her daughter were already there and sit like in a completely empty fast food restaurant, like close to them. So she's like immediately like just a little uneasy, whatever. And this will be.
Which that's a little odd, right? Most of the time,
super odd. Yeah, for sure.
Kind of like, you know, go a couple tables over.
Red flag number one, right? But then interestingly enough, find out later, the reason they did that is because they had seen this like homeless, sketchy guy that was eyeing the daughter and the mom from the parking lot. And they had just been like, hey, that guy looks like no good. And so they decided to, without making a big deal, just sit next to the mom and the daughter. And sure enough, this guy comes into the restaurant and starts just like belligerently like yelling, like whatever at the mom and the daughter. And the three men pretty quickly, like, you know, just grabbed the guy and escorted him outside and like, you know, just kind of like dealt with the issue. And it was just a cool story. So the mom posted it just kind of like sharing it as like a heads up, whatever. But I think it was really interesting. I sent you that article the other day of how like there's this like inherent need of men to like be the hero of the story.
Oh yeah.
And how that's something that like in some ways has been like seen as a
vilified.
problem.
Yeah,
vilified. But like there are so many examples of like we shouldn't vilify that. Like that's what men are around to do. Like there should be men like those three guys that like that wasn't their responsibility. That wasn't someone they knew. That wasn't their wife. That wasn't their daughter. But they were just like, hey, like that looks like a bad guy. This is obviously just a woman and her daughter. Like, you know, we should be around in case something goes down. Yeah. It was just a cool example of not, you know, the story not going maybe where you thought it would have, but, you know, like I don't know who those guys are.
I didn't know what you're going to say because I thought it would be weird for a group of 3, especially like construction workers, to be doing anything negative. I know that sounds weird, but like when I think about like construction workers, like blue collar, like especially a group of 3, I think about a group of guys who like, I wouldn't want to fuck with them. I wouldn't. They're tough dudes who have, probably overcame some adversity, and I imagine they're trying to like live a good life. That's like of course there's always exceptions, but especially in a group of 3, it's hard for me to believe. I think that a lot of times, and maybe I'd have to look at the statistics, but I don't think with maybe I'm wrong, because maybe if you look like gangs and stuff, there's a lot of like that peer pressure type of thing. But in general, dude, if you have a group of 3 guys, like one of them trying to do something super inappropriate, you'd think the other guys would be like, hey, bro, like that's not cool. You at least hope for that, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd have to look at the statistic. I don't know. Maybe there is like this peer pressure type of thing, especially when you're younger. But I think as you get older, a group of 3 guys, someone acting up, I think in general, most guys would be like, hey man, like that's not cool,
Yeah, I don't think it would change the fact that it would be weird. And just kind of like, you'd be like, what's going on for them to like sit so close to them? But no, I agree, especially if they're like clearly guys that like came off of work. Yeah, I think if it's like 3 like teenagers or like super young guys, that would be maybe more of a red flag. I agree with you 100%. But I thought it was a cool story, man. I think that, some of that stuff and celebrating some of that stuff a little bit more is important. And then the article I sent you was a little funnier, but it was essentially like a guy had passed out drunk in the bathroom.
Yeah.
And all the guys in the bar like took their turn trying to knock down the door. Yeah. And it became this like huge, like, machismo dick measuring contest, for lack of a better term. But yeah, man, like guys just want to be the hero. And that's not a bad thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. But tying it back to what we do and our message, like regardless of the situation that you find yourself in, you're going to be more likely to be able to be the hero or the one that just helps out if you've trained, if you're fit, if you're, in a good position and prepared to do so. And I think it's our responsibility as men to make sure that we're doing that. Yeah,
the command presence is huge. Okay, so I don't know if we have time for this, but I guess we have time for this. We have time. We are gonna close this thing out with a story about a Bible. Okay, so all right, okay, giving some back context here about iron sharpens iron, Proverbs 27:17. Okay, I gotta share this with you. Many months ago, I get a message because of the podcast, and this guy sends me a message that says, hey, when I hear you and Gabe talk, it reminds me a lot of Proverbs 27:17. Iron sharpens iron, as one man sharpens another, or it's been adjusted to as one friend sharpens another, right? Like there's multiple versions of it. He goes, I think what you're doing at the men's club, through the podcast, through social, it really speaks to me in this way. And so I got that email. I'm like, you know what? Okay. So I started deep diving. I went on YouTube. I did this. I did that. And I'm sharing this backstory. So some of you may have already heard this, but I'm in the sauna. It's early in the morning, and I'm listening to a YouTube video on iron sharpens iron. I was like compelled to share it. But I didn't share it. I was like, it's 6 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. I don't need to share this with a friend or whatever it was. Fast forward 30 minutes to get out of the sauna. I text a friend of mine, the only friend I text, Sal DiStefano. I said, hey man, for some reason I feel compelled to text you this. This Proverbs really speaks to me and the work we're trying to get done. And he writes back to me, weird, I'm wearing that shirt right now, and sends me a picture of him in his car wearing an iron sharpens iron t-shirt. I was like, wow, that's weird, right? Like that's a sign. Something's weird here. So you fast forward, I share that story on the podcast. Like basically we get a random email through the podcast, and iron sharpens iron. And we talk about it, right, Gabe? You and I spoke about this a few times about how, like, I don't know if that's a coincidence. It's like, no, there's no coincidence there, man. That was a sign, right? That was clearly a sign. So you fast forward to about a week ago, and I get a Bible in the mail. And the Bible is leather bound, super nice, and it says Jason Khalipa on it. And then it says Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpens iron, as one friend sharpens another friend, or one man sharpens another man, on the cover of it, right? Like super nice. And I'm like, dude, who sent me this? I couldn't figure out who sent it to me. So I'm like looking through it. I'm like, Ashley, did anything else come out with it? She's like, no, nothing came. It was just the Bible. And I'm like, bro, that is the weirdest thing, right? That we've been talking about this. It's been coming up in our lives a lot. Iron sharpens iron, iron sharpens iron. It's been coming up a bunch of ways, in particular, the story I just shared. And then, so I'm looking through my phone. I'm like, I got to figure out who sent me this. So I put in my home address to see who I sent my home address to send it to me. Because I figured like, whatever. So a buddy of mine, Charlie, I noticed that I had sent him my address a couple of weeks ago. And he had wrote back to me, hey, I'm going to send you a book. It's going to arrive roughly around this time. So I'm like, oh, it must be him. So I text him. I was like, hey man, did you send me a Bible? He goes, yeah, I sent you a Bible. He's like, I didn't want to tell you. And so I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. I was like, hey man, did I ever talk to you about what iron sharpens iron means to me and how it's like came up in my life a lot? He goes, I have no idea what you're talking about. So he calls me. So I get on the phone with him and he goes, Jason, he's like, I knew nothing about iron sharpens iron, and the fact that it came up in a previous email, and that the fact that Sal was wearing the shirt, I felt like God spoke to me, and he told me to send you a Bible. And he told me that I didn't know if you were religious. I didn't know anything about your preference. That's why I told you over text it was just a book, because I didn't know if you were going to like be offended that I was going to send you a Bible. So that's why I said book. And then I was specifically told to send you this proverb and have it on the cover. And I'm like, bro. And so here, that's where we're at, is like, dude, this guy knew nothing about me, reading about the proverb, having Sal with the t-shirt on, and then he sends me his Bible out of the blue with the proverb on it. And he knew nothing about anything previously. And he said that he was actually told to send me that. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, man. I mean, I've been the biggest, just general, like, skeptic, like whatever you want to call it, for honestly my entire life. And this podcast has changed that completely. And so yeah, man, it's super interesting, and I think that at the end of the day, someone could listen to this and easily justify the fact that, like, dude, iron sharpens iron is a super common proverb verse, super common, right? Like, is it completely?
Is it though? Like,
yeah, I mean,
before it started coming into my life, I never really heard it, but I mean, yeah, okay, sure. Let's just say that.
I mean, I think it is, because like I've heard of it prior to like any of us talking about it, because there's clothing behind it. Like, it's iron sharpens iron. Like it's. I think it's fair to say that it's probably one of the more common verses that like most people would know, even if they're not like someone that can cite anything from the Bible for.
Sure.
I think that that's fair to say. The fact that like there's a shirt with it, I think speaks volumes to it. But essentially all I'm trying to say is that, like, I think that it could be easy for people to be like, well, it is coincidence. This is a little bit more common. Like, you surround yourself, especially now, with a lot of people that, are very invested in their faith, and like, there's all very easily could have been, you're kind of looking to connect the dots. But I think that at the end of the day, whether it's coincidence or not, like, choosing to believe, I think, is an incredibly powerful, and I've talked about this before, like, no loss scenario, right? Like, all it does is like get you super fired up about what you're doing and it being special, and there being like a bigger why behind everything that we're trying to do here. And there's nothing wrong with thinking about that period. And that's me sharing my perspective from someone that I think would have reacted to that story very differently 6-8 months ago than even I do now. So I can see it. I can see how easy it is to just be like, dude, like, you're putting too much thought into like, connecting these dots. Yeah. But dude, I mean, there's been a lot of things that have happened to me, man, that have been strange over the past year. I've shared them with you, man. The crazy thing, I shared this with you. I didn't share it on the podcast though. When I was doing a lot of running in the mornings, I always have a podcast on, but there were like 3 times in a row in the span of like 3 weeks where it was raining, and it was raining pretty hard. And when your phone is wet and like you're wet, it's impossible to press buttons. And I was wet because I was running outside. So it's not like I even had something to dry my hands. And so when a podcast would finish, it would just randomly pick whatever next episode, just based off of like the different shows that I have, that I follow, or whatever, download, whatever. And it would just start playing it. And on all 3 of those occasions, even though the podcast I was listening to was never like super faith, whatever, On all three of those occasions, it started playing a podcast that was like with someone. It was like it was like the one Rogan guest that was like an expert in like the Bible and religion and whatever. Is like a couple months back. I'd have to look back on it. But all three times, it would podcasts that were like 100% about faith. And it like, that's what it played for me. And I share that with you because I was like, dude, super strange. Like that's dude. Like not a coincidence. Then there was like the 444 thing. So it's, yeah, man. I mean, I don't know. I think that it's pretty crazy. It's crazy
but
to
dude,
think about.
Bro. Yeah. I mean,
the fact that he didn't know anything about it, the fact that there was no connection to like, it would have been different if it was the guy who emailed you that sent it, or if Sal had sent it.
Or if someone had listened to the podcast and then heard us talk about it and then sent it. Like that makes sense. Like a buddy of mine, he bought me a shirt, Iron Sharpens Iron shirt. He bought it for me and he gave it to me as a gift. Okay, that makes sense. He knows that we had talked on the podcast. We got a gift. Like totally makes sense. But this out of the blue. And then when I call him and he's like, dude, I knew nothing about it. I just felt super compelled to send this to you. I don't know, man. It just makes me feel like, you know, we're on a mission to make an impact. And I feel like this continues to come up. So I wanted to share that here because maybe for guys listening, they might have some signs that are coming up in their life. I just think being open-minded to it. And then also recognizing that like, yeah, just being open-minded to it. That's it. And not being so closed off to it. It's like, yeah, you know, you might be sitting there and be like, Jason, you're full of you know, this is like, dude, whatever. Or you could be like, hey man, that's pretty cool. Like keep sharing, you know what I'm saying? Like someone who's listening to this might be like, all right, that's cool. Like whatever, that's different. I wasn't expecting him to say that.
There's a really interesting podcast. So Rogan had this lady Kai Dickens on the podcast recently. This was the February 26th. I listened to it last week. And she came out with this podcast called the Telepathy Tapes. And dude, like you want to have something blow your mind. I want to listen to the actual Telepathy Tapes, but her whole body of research, because she's been an investigative journalist, scientist, is on kids with somewhere on the autism spectrum that are nonverbal, and their ability to communicate with their parents or their teachers through nonverbal means. So like literally telepathy, and the whole argument behind it. And apparently this is like well documented. Like they have cases and cases and cases of these kids who can like see what their parents are seeing, or like, you know what they're thinking and all of these things. And the whole conversation they were having, and I know this sounds crazy, but there's been a lot of documented cases about it. And it kind of makes sense because what they were talking about is that we all have this inherent like sense where we're all connected in a way that like isn't just the words that I say and you listen to them. But it kind of gets atrophied because we never need to use it. But these kids that, you know, don't have the ability to speak and communicate the way that we do, it becomes amplified in them. And one example that they brought up of the fact that like we all kind of have this, and I think that everyone can relate to this experience, is the Sal story reminded me of it. When you like think about someone and then they call you, or like, you know, you call someone and it's kind of cause like you were like, nah, like that's weird. Like you almost feel like, you know, they like popped into your head. And they were using that as an example of like, we all are kind of like connected in some way, because we all have that experience. Like you think about someone and they like call you. It's strange, right? You can't explain it. Again, you can chalk all this stuff up to coincidence, but something else to think about. And it was a mind-blowing podcast. It was super interesting. My mom like believes in all this stuff. So I sent her the podcast and she was pretty entertained by it, but it's crazy, man.
I'll have to check it out. Oh man. Well, for everyone, you know, look, if you guys are out there, if you guys are getting after Train Hard, April 1st, right? Updated.
April. Just April.
April. Yeah. New, updated Train Hard app. A lot of good things with that. Super excited about it.
Dude.
And just like the updates, the upgrades, the community function, where we want to go, what we want to do, is just, it's absolutely necessary. The timing is where it needs to be. So stay tuned for that. Be on the newsletter, listen to the podcast, share this with a friend, leave it a rating and a review. I know that we ask a lot of you guys. I know that we do. we ask a lot of ourselves too, though. You know, we're trying to go out there, we're trying to spread this message, and we're not stopping until we get to where we need to go, which is impacting more and more guys. And so if you're out there right now and you want to help share that message, share the podcast, leave it a rating review, helps everybody else out. And more important than anything, I hope you and your family are doing great. Keep kicking ass, keep training hard. And Gabe, I guess we'll get after it again for next week, huh?